Thank you, Father Gabriel, for joining me to do a little bit of an interview. So, for people who don't know you, please introduce yourself. And for those who are also unfamiliar with monastic life, what is monasticism? What does it mean to be a monk?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me today. It's a joy to be here with you. My name is Father Gabriel. I'm from Holy Cross Monastery in West Virginia. Holy Cross has been in West Virginia since 2000. It was founded originally in 1986 in Missouri, outside of St. Louis. So the monastery sort of started its growth there, but the property was very limited. St. Louis was expanding, and if I remember right, the city was planning to build a road right through the dining hall. So for various reasons, the monastery growing, the city growing, it didn't seem like it was the best place for the monastery to be. So in 2000, a pious couple, Mo and Nadia Sill, who lived here on this property, actually donated the property to us. He was a professor, at Marshall University. She was the daughter of a priest from, I think, California, I believe. They were very close to the church, and they both felt very strongly about trying to bring Orthodoxy to the area. And of course, in our Orthodox tradition, it might sound strange, to people who aren't familiar with the concept. But really, monasticism has always been one of the main missionary vehicles of the church throughout the 2,000-year history of the Orthodox Church. You can see this, in many different times and places, but especially in Russia. Really, if you look at the Christianization of Russia, very often what would happen is monks would go out into the wilderness to be alone, to be secluded, to be able to pray and repent and be with God. But the people would get curious and want to go and see what was going on out there, and they would meet these monks, these holy people, and they would become so attracted by the beauty of the Orthodox way of life that they would move out there, and whole villages would really form around these monasteries. And so this is quite a common phenomenon in Russia and Eastern Europe. And like I said, it's a bit foreign maybe to the American mindset, the Protestant mindset, who think of well, monks, what are they really doing for the church? What are they doing for other people? They're just off doing their own thing. But really, in the Orthodox, in the lived experience of the Orthodox Church, that's really not the case at all. So Mo and Nadia knew this. They really thought that bringing monasticism, especially English speaking monasticism, to this area was very important, so much so they were willing to give us their homes, to donate this property for us to build the monastery here. So we are, as I just mentioned, an English-speaking monastery. We're part of the Russian Orthodox Church abroad, but all of us are Americans. The vast majority of us are converts to the Orthodox faith. And almost everything here is in English. We all, the day-to-day life here is in English. The services are almost entirely in English. We'll do a little bit of Slavonic if we have some Russian visitors, just to try to make them feel at home a bit. But really, this is the vision that the founders of this monastery have had is really to bring sort of the ancient, timeless experience of Orthodox monasticism to America, to American people in the English language. So on the one hand, we value our heritage very much, but we also value the fact that we're Americans and that we're here in the midst of other Americans very much. And we feel that that's a very sort of unique ministry that we have to the church. Monasticism is very ancient and a very important part of the Orthodox Church, but here in America, it's still very young, very small. If people don't speak English, if people only speak English, if they don't speak one of the old world languages, there's only really a few monasteries that they can go to and experience things in a way that they can understand. As far as I know, we're one of, if not the largest English-speaking men's monastery in the world. That goes to show you how small English-speaking monasticism is. I think there's about 27 of us. So, we have nothing compared to the hundreds or thousands, that some monasteries in Greece or Russia might have. But God has been very kind to us, bringing us here, bringing us together with one another. I myself came here in 2010. So I converted to Orthodoxy in Raleigh, North Carolina at an Antiochian church there, All Saints, in I believe 2000, I forget if it was 2006 or 2007. it was during my my college years, and so I found out about Orthodoxy. I was not a Christian at the time, but I thought I knew all about Christianity, but I encountered Orthodoxy, and it was this whole completely different world, this whole completely different understanding of what the Christian faith really meant. And so, almost as soon as I encountered Orthodoxy, I heard about monasticism, that it wasn't just something that medieval monks did 500 years ago, 700 years ago, but it was still something that was a living part of the church today. And so very soon after I became Orthodox, I began to visit here at Holy Cross and visit a few other monasteries. And, I just felt really this sense. I mean, I had a lot of good reasons ultimately, but I felt a sense that I couldn't on the deepest level explain that if I was really going to be serious about my faith, that this was what God was calling me to do. So I moved here in 2010. I was ordained to the priesthood in 2014. So I've been a priest now for about 10 years. There's really, I don't think, that much more to say about me personally. Monks usually don't like to talk about themselves too much. I'm happy to share something that you might feel the viewers would be benefited by, but I don't want to just, launch into soliloquy about my own life.
Sure.
But hopefully that's a little bit of an introduction to myself and to the monastery. I guess about the question of monasticism in general. I mentioned, of course, the aspect in which we're missionaries and have been missionaries, throughout much of the history of the church. As far as what monasticism really is, it's a hard thing to put into words, but I would say, probably the best way to explain it briefly is to talk about really the founder of Cenobitic monasticism, who was Saint Anthony the Great, and the famous story from his life, third, fourth century, is that he was in church one day and he heard the gospel reading of the rich young man who asked, the Lord, what do I need to do to be saved? And of course, he said, the commandments. And he said, well, I've kept the commandments. What do I still lack? And Christ said, if you would be perfect, go sell all that you have, give to the poor, and come and follow me. And so when Saint Anthony heard this, he just immediately did so. He left the church, he sold everything that he had, and he went to the desert in order to leave behind all the things that were distractions from the one thing needful, really. So, I would say really, it's not that monasticism is some kind of different Christianity or different life. It's the Christian life. It's simply the attempt to live that life with as few distractions as possible, with as few unnecessary things in life that would and it's not that anything else other than monasticism is somehow bad or evil. Of course, marriage is blessed. St. Paul is very, very clear about that. The parish life that we have in the Orthodox Church is wonderful. It's not that monasticism is somehow the only real thing or the best thing or the highest thing. Another example or rather metaphor that I heard early on that was very helpful for me personally in coming to understand what monasticism really was that, if the church is a hospital, this is, of course, for us Orthodox Christians, a common metaphor. St. John Chrysostom said, that the church isn't a courtroom for souls, it's a hospital for souls. So if the church is a hospital, then, when we talk about, parish life versus monastery life, the saying is that the parishes are the outpatient clinics and the monasteries are the ICUs. Some people are able to be healthy, normal Christian people, going to the outpatient clinic a few times a week, for example, going to church on Sundays, maybe a few weekdays. But those of us who are really sick, those of us who really need a lot of help to struggle with our passions, and we need all the tools that we can get in order to keep ourselves focused on Christ above all else. We need to go to the ICU, to the monastery. We need to be enmeshed in the healing atmosphere of the church 24/7, basically. So again, it's really hard to get to the essence of what monasticism is, but these are a few, ways, I guess, of introducing it. That basically what we do here, day in, day out, is simply try to follow the gospel commandments as thoroughly as we can. And of course, we fail all the time. We're very sinful people. None of us are by any means the spiritual giants that you read about when you read about some of the monastic saints. But at the same time, if you can say anything good about us, it's really that at least all of us share the same goal, the same ideal, that even though we do it very imperfectly, we're trying to put Christ above everything else each moment of the day. We're trying to put the spiritual life above anything else, and we're trying to put one another above ourselves each moment of the day. And so again, even though we fail at that constantly, still it's that's the effort that we're trying to make.
Okay. So I think maybe to kind of make it a little more concrete for people, maybe talk about what you do at Holy Cross, or what a day in the life of a monk looks like.
So I'll say first of all that in Orthodoxy, it's different. It's a different situation than, for example, in the Catholic Church, where the Catholic Church has these different orders of monasticism. You have the Benedictines, you have the Trappists, the Cistercians, and really you kind of know what to expect. If you go to a Trappist monastery, it's going to be essentially the same kind of life, at least, as at a different Trappist monastery. In Orthodoxy, each monastery is really unique. It's like its own unique person. So there are of course things that are going to be common. There are things that are going to be fairly universal, but at the same time, each monastery has its own particular ministry, its own particular expression of how they live out those kind of monastic ideals, or try to the best of their ability. So I can tell you what a day at Holy Cross is like. That's not necessarily going to be the same as the day-to-day life at really any other Orthodox monastery will necessarily be, even though there's going to obviously be high-level similarities. Of course, church is always important. Obedience is important, prayer is important, but how that's expressed in a day-to-day life, it's really going to be different at each place that you go to. But here at Holy Cross, we are a Cenobitic monastery, which is really a Greek word for meaning monks who do everything together in common. There's kind of the more eremitic tradition, which is like hermits, where people are really seeking monasticism in a very individual way, a solitary way. But the kind of monasticism we have here is really based on community life. Both are important, both are good, but the Holy Fathers say that the communal life is much safer, especially for beginners. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe we can get into that later. But anyway, I wanted to sort of introduce the concept of doing everything together as being very important for the kind of monasticism that we have. So each day, the day begins formally at 5 o'clock in the morning. We have matins and liturgy together in church. That lasts until around 8 o'clock, give or take, depending on what the feast is that day, what kind of service it is that day. But we start with matins and liturgy, and that's something that's very important to us, that we begin the day not only together, praying before God, worshiping together in God, but also with the opportunity to receive Holy Communion every day. That's really a tremendous blessing that very few people have, and not that every monk necessarily does receive communion each day. Everyone has their own sort of spiritual discipline that they work out with their spiritual father, what's best for them. But at least, even to be in the presence of the mystical sacrifice every day, and to be transported really to the worship of heaven, as the foundation of each day, the beginning of each day, is very important. So after that, from about 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, there's free time. Some people will go back and do some spiritual reading, maybe say some of their prayer rule. Maybe they had gotten up earlier before the morning services to pray, and so they'll take a little nap or something like that. But at any rate, at 9 o'clock, from about 9 to noon, is the morning work period. So something that St. Benedict, one of the Western monastic fathers, said, the Latin phrase is ora et labora, which means work and prayer. And really, these are the two things that monks have to hold together. It's of course, it's understood that it's very important to pray as monks, but it's also extremely important to work, preferably with our hands. This is something that is really, again, maybe surprising to people. People might have the idea, monks, they just go and they pray all day long, or they read spiritual books all day long or something. And then, they show up here and become a novice, and they're told to, scrub the toilets or go, muck out the barn or something like that. And they're like, this isn't the spiritual life. This isn't what I signed up for. But really, it's it's important not only on the practical sense that, of course, there's 27 people here. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to keep the monastery going, in order to provide financially for the Brotherhood to continue, in order to serve the pilgrims and visitors who come here. But on a spiritual level, to learn that, that whatever we're doing, whatever kind of work that we're doing all day long, even if it is something as seemingly mundane as scrubbing a toilet, or packing up boxes in the shipping room, whatever it is, that this is also a form of prayer. This is also part of our spiritual life, that this is an offering that we're making to God, to our brothers, to the visitors, that we're giving God our small labors, and in return, he's using it to create this holy place where, people can come and get away from the world for a few days to really immerse themselves in the church for a few days. The prayers that we're offering, of course, for the world are important, but also this, this physical service. And so on a practical level, that can, again, take many forms. Obviously, people need to cook, people need to clean, we need to work on maintaining the buildings, we need to work on building new buildings. We are a growing monastery, and we always have some construction project or another going. As far as financial support, the main thing that we do to support ourselves is to make incense for churches as well as for individuals. We also make candles. We make various baked goods, soaps, different things like that that we'll sell in our store or online. The clergy spend a good portion of their days spiritually counseling either the Brotherhood or the visitors. We have a farm. We have a bunch of chickens, so there's outdoor work to do. We keep very, very busy. People often might think that it's very boring to be a monk. When in reality, I was bored far more often as a layperson than I ever have been as a monk. There's always plenty to do here. The morning work period is 9 to noon. At noon, we gather in church again together for a short prayer service to our patron saint for the sick and the suffering. And right after that, we all have lunch together. In the monastery, we have, at least in our monastery, we have 2 formal meals a day, lunch and supper. For breakfast, there's sort of just a small buffet that people can go to optionally in between the morning services and the beginning of the work period. But the formal meals are lunch and supper. And something that's very distinctive about monastic practice is we keep silence during these meals, and we listen to someone read from either the life of the saint of the day or some other spiritually profitable book, so that at the same time that we're feeding our bodies, we're also feeding our souls. So that, again, it's a big transition from what we're used to in the world. And I think sometimes people might think, well, how do you really have the chance to get close to each other if you don't speak during meals, if you don't take that time to converse with one another? But in reality, our experience is really that it really strengthens our spiritual bonds with one another quite a bit, that we're, of course, gathered together, eating together, but we're also with God. We're also communing with God at the same time that we're feeding our bodies, and that over time, that kind of spiritual connection that we have with one another, even if it's unspoken, is really extremely powerful. So anyway, sorry for that tangent. After lunch, there's another hour or so of free time. 1:30 to 4:30 is the second work period of the day, the afternoon work period. And then afterward, we clean up. At 5 o'clock, we gather again in church for Vespers. Right after Vespers is supper, and then right after supper is Compline. So that'll end sometime between 6 and 6:30. From then until 9 at night is again some unstructured free time that people use in different ways. And then from 9 in the evening to 9 in the morning, we keep total silence. So during 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., we have a blessing to speak. Again, the whole issue of silence and how much to converse with one another, how much to converse with pilgrims, is something that will vary quite a bit from monastery to monastery. But one of our vocations, at Holy Cross, is really hospitality, to offer the ability for pilgrims, lay people, visitors to come and share our life with us. We always have many visitors each day of the year now. It wasn't that way when I first came. When I first started visiting in 2008, there were maybe a few visitors that would come each month. But now, as I said, we really almost always have 5, 10, 15 people with us constantly. So that's something that we didn't necessarily decide to do, but rather I think God called us to do it. So partially for that reason, we do tend to speak with one another and with visitors more than some other monasteries might. Also, our abbot feels that as Americans, we need to be aware of sort of the strengths that we have, but also the weaknesses that we have. And really, as Americans, we're not cut out for that kind of really austere, silent life that maybe some of the ancient fathers lived. Most of us would probably just have some kind of nervous breakdown or something like that. So, of course, we got to try to keep a balance, and find the middle path in everything. And so here, that's how we try to do it. Half the day we speak, half the day we don't speak. That's the kind of balance that we go for as far as that goes. So, looking at it all kind of holistically, we spend, about 6 hours or so a day working, spend about 4 to 5 hours a day, depending, in prayer and church together. Each person has their own, private prayer role and cell role that, it's different for each monk. But those are sort of the three main areas of a monk's life. There's private prayer, there's corporate prayer, and then there's the work, the labor that we do for the sake of the monastery. So if you have any questions about any of that, please feel free to ask. But that's sort of the bird's eye view of what a normal day is here.
Okay. So you mentioned you guys kind of support yourself through the work that you do on a day-to-day basis. I visited Holy Cross a little over a year ago, and it was the first time I had visited a monastery. So it was a really good experience, and it was it wasn't too austere. I also have been to Mount Athos, so that was quite the difference.
World for sure.
Yeah. So I highly recommend it for anyone who's anywhere within the radius of Wayne, West Virginia, to come check out Holy Cross. But you guys do book pretty far in advance, so definitely plan ahead.
We are, we're hoping to expand our guest facilities. As I said, for many years of our existence, we weren't used to getting hardly any guests at all. So we do have limited accommodations. We try to make room for everybody that we possibly can. But if you do want to come, definitely the furthest out in advance you can reach out and try to arrange a time, the better. God willing, as we're able to get some of these buildings built, that it'll become less difficult to try to get a reservation in with us. But at least for right now, if you can let us know at least a few months in advance, just to make sure that the time that you want is going to be available.
Gotcha. So on the topic of, you guys have a lot of building projects and you're supporting yourselves through your work. Where can people go to donate, and what are some of the current projects that you guys are doing currently?
So the most important thing by far right now is we're building a new church. As I mentioned earlier, the monastery moved to West Virginia in 2000. At that time, there were 8 people in the brotherhood. And so the church, which was the first thing, of course, that we built when we got to the property, was really designed for a brotherhood of 8 people who had almost no visitors. We've expanded that building a little bit, but there's only so much physical space that we could use to expand that. And so the current church that we have is getting quite cramped, especially when there's a lot of visitors for a feast day or when there's visiting clergy. The altar is extremely small, and for a brotherhood now of, as I said, I think around 27. We've limited the brotherhood to that number for, I think, almost 10 years now, because the thought was that if we don't have room in the church, and also if we don't have room in the dining hall for more brothers than we have now, it doesn't make any more sense to build more dormitories to accept more brothers until we can build a larger church that's really suited for the kind of numbers even that we have now, much less that we might have once we do build more monastic dormitory space and more guest houses. So by God's grace, we're getting very close to being done with that. It's been a long project. There have been a lot of temptations. I'm sure if you ask almost anyone who's gone through a church building project, they'll be able to tell you from their own experience that the devil hates when churches are being built. That's absolutely true. The devil also hates monasteries. And so I guess when you're a monastery and you're building a church, you really get attacked. We've had a lot of temptations, but God's brought us through everything. We're getting quite close now to being able to move into the new church. Hopefully this coming year, if God wills. But we do still need some help to get moved into it, especially to get things like the iconostas built, to be able to outfit the dining hall with the kitchen equipment and the tables and chairs that we'll need. So if you're interested in learning more about that project and in helping out, you can go to our website at holycross.org. There's some videos describing the project. There's a web page that describes the new church in detail. There's construction photos, but to summarize, we've built it to be able to comfortably accommodate a brotherhood of 50, as well as about 100 to 125 more visitors. So we're not anticipating on having that many visitors daily, but for the big feasts that we do have, the Exaltation of the Cross, St. Pantaleon's Day, who's our patron saint, we do get hundreds of people for those feast days, and so we want to be able to accommodate them as well. So again, we're getting very close to that, thank God. Once that new church is able to be moved into, then it's our plan to immediately afterward start on a new dormitory project to be able to bring in more brothers, because again, we've been about the size that we are, which is 27 or so people for pretty close to 10 years now. And of course, with all the young men coming into Orthodoxy, we have a lot of people come who are interested in the monastic life, but we simply don't have the room to accept them. So our abbot, Father Seraphim, feels very, very strongly that this new church building is his legacy to the brotherhood, but also to the church in America in general, for him to leave behind this place where, again, not only can monastics come and try to work out their salvation, but the increasing number of families, of pilgrims who want to come here. And the world around us is becoming so hostile towards the spiritual life in so many different ways that even though I think it's always been important, I think it's even more important now than ever for there to be these places of spiritual refuge where people can go, for a weekend or a week, once a year or once every couple of years, whatever your schedule allows, but to really just get away from all of these distractions, all of this tumult, all of this noise that's basically pulling us away from Christ, trying to distract us with this thing or that thing that ultimately isn't going to last into eternity, and be able to just spend a few days here peacefully, being immersed in the church 24/7. It's an extremely valuable and important experience, I think, that will really, I'm sure, especially having been to Athos, you've experienced this, that even after you leave and come back, you look at the world in a different way, you look at your life in a different way, and you're able hopefully to retain some of that grace of having been in a holy place. And of course, we're nothing on the level of Mount Athos, but at the same time, I've seen so much grace being given to the people who come here, not because we're anything, but because this is a place dedicated to God. This is a place where Saint Pantaleon, our patron saint, is very close to us, and we've seen him, with our own eyes, work many miracles for the people who have come here suffering either in soul or in body. And it's such a blessing for us to be able to be a small part of that work that God's doing for the church here in America. But of course, for that to happen, there needs to be a physical place for that to happen. So
Right.
to build this new church, to build ultimately more space for monastics and for visitors, this is important, I think, for the church in America. There's a saying from ancient times that really monasticism is the spiritual barometer of the church. That if monasticism is healthy, that means that the church is healthy. But if monasticism isn't healthy, that means that the church isn't healthy. And again, it's not because monasticism is something different than the church, or that that monasticism is somehow the essential part of Christianity, but simply it's to say that in any time in which the church is spiritually healthy, you'll be able to see all the different vocations of Christian life not only being lived out, but supporting one another, helping one another, interacting with one another. It's very important for us as monks to see lay people, and especially families, come, to be able to see, healthy, Christian families come and participate in the prayer life together with us. It's a tremendous consolation, and it reminds us that really for Orthodox Christians, distance is not any kind of barrier, that our union with one another is in Christ, and that, whether, we're a monk here, praying and laboring and trying to repent of our sins, or if we're married with kids, living in the middle of a huge bustling city, that, not only are we living the same spiritual life, but we all need one another to be living that spiritual life together, praying for each other, helping one another, inspiring one another, showing each other these different manifestations of what Christian love really means. So we invite all of you, of course, to come if you're able to, and participate in that with us here, but also to please remember us in your prayers, in your churches, in your homes, as we are praying for you all here at the monastery. This kind of Christian unity is especially important in the kind of really fragmented, disassociated world that we're living in now, where there's so much division and hostility and enmity. I think really to focus on the only source of real unity there can possibly be, which is our life in Christ, is something that's so important for all of us.